Hoi Arisen. Today we're going through everything we know about Dragon Dogma 2 Dark Arisen so far. Over the last few days, several developer interviews have revealed an absurd amount of information scattered across different outlets and languages. So Reddit user Merliak did the exhausting work of compiling the major details into one enormous post. So I reached out to them and they kindly gave me permission to use it as my structural starting point, and then I checked the original interviews and added several details that weren't included. So let's go through it all, shall we? By the way, it's all broken down into chapters for your convenience, so feel free to jump around. The expansion takes place during the main game rather than after it, and both major parts of Dark Arisen, the Norgan region and the Lost Rite dungeons, become available through Captain Brandt after reaching Vernworth for the first time, so pretty much at the beginning of the game. Norgan has a recommended starting level of 40, which a lot of people, myself included, thought was kinda low, but that's only the entry point recommendation and the content becomes more difficult as you progress. The Lost Rite dungeons, which are 12 new dungeon challenges, connect to the fuck-ass sealed doors found throughout the base game, have an entry point of level 20, but their difficulty increases considerably as players progress. The Lost Rites are deliberately positioned as a leveling route towards Norgan, and they grant increased XP and stronger than usual equipment. As for length, the Norgan story is estimated to take approximately 15 to 20 hours, that's before accounting for exploration and repeated loot farming. Each Lost Rite dungeon is expected to take 30 minutes to 1 hour, which adds another 6 to 12 hours, right? Capcom estimates that the expansion contains more than 25 hours of additional content, which doesn't sound like a lot, but again, that's before accounting for extensive exploration and repeated loot farming. And one last detail here. Some of the Lost Rite dungeons will be available only in the endgame, the Unmoored World. Other than that, the expansion won't dramatically restructure it. To quote the developers, the DLC will have a limited influence on that version of the world. Norgan. Norgan is the expansion's new area. It's a large open field region rather than another enclosed BBI-style dungeon. It was once a prosperous northern territory connected to Vermont through trade and travel, but the region collapsed due to its brutal environment and an additional unknown calamity. Strange phenomena began appearing in the supposedly abandoned territory, causing the Arisen to investigate. Players begin near the lower foothills and gradually ascend into deeper snow, increasingly severe weather, and a more disturbing atmosphere. The region becomes progressively darker and stranger as the player approaches the heart of its story. Norgan includes main story quests, side quests, open exploration, scenic locations, and environmental landmarks that can lead to discoveries or even progress the story. What's also really cool is that the weather in Norgan is a functional gameplay system. For example, blizzards reduce visibility, while enemy voices and echoes can help reveal their positions. There are also icicles that can be used as environmental combat elements, perhaps like the crumbling pillars in Drabnir's Grotto in the base game. There are also avalanches that are involved in traversal and combat, again, perhaps similarly to the torrents of water in the base game. The foothills of Norgan are not fully covered in snow, but as you progress further into the region, the snow becomes deeper. Some areas even suffer from constant blizzards, and signs that something is deeply wrong become increasingly obvious. Lastly, a pet wolf can reportedly be adopted in Norgan's hub area. The wolf can help locate loot and search for items independently and lead the player towards places where it has detected something. Now a bit more on the 12 Lost Rite dungeons. There are 12 sealed doors found throughout the base game. They lead to 12 individual dungeon challenges. Each one has its own identity and unique challenge. They become increasingly difficult, and the harder ones grant more XP. Each dungeon ends with unique equipment associated with Arisen who previously attempted the trials. This equipment follows traditional progression, meaning it can be enhanced to improve its stats. The dungeons also contain some background lore, but not an especially elaborate narrative. Completing all of them, however, reveals why the trials exist and why they were created in the first place by the Pathfinder. Now, there are no new vocations in Dark Arisen. Capcom chose to focus its resources on expanding the existing vocations and adding new monsters and enemy skeletons and creating Norgan itself. So the level cap remains 999, new skills that did not exist in the base game will be added, and as we know from the August patch notes, each vocation will have 6 skill slots. Enemies in Norgan have been designed with the 6-slot system in mind, by the way. Additionally, some relic weapons found in Norgan, the ones that need to be appraised, can come with entirely new custom skills or altered versions of existing ones. Upgraded versions of these skills briefly produce like a dark red visual effect when used, I guess to separate them from the original ones. Capcom also identified smaller enemies repeatedly stun-locking players as a major combat frustration and is adjusting the systems around that problem in the August update. I personally thought it was fine. Actually, I completely understand the frustration, but man, going to like Drabnir's grotto and just being stomped into the ground by knackers has its charm. I don't know, man. I always approached it with, well, don't get caught then mindset. I mean, we'll see what they do about it.
I shan't allow any further. I cannot afford to cower.
Now let's talk about the new loot system. Norgan introduces unidentified pieces of equipment called Relics. You find them while exploring, bring them back to be appraised, and pay for the appraisal using rift crystals. Once a relic is identified, it can come with randomized properties. These include different attack and defense values, some statistical bonuses, special abilities, upgraded custom skills, and other modifiers depending on the relic's rank. So the core gameplay loop is this. It's fairly simple. You explore Norgan, collect unidentified relics, return to have them appraised, compare their properties, and slowly build combinations that suit your preferred playstyle. Then you take that gear into harder content, find more relics, and repeat the process until Capcom announces Dragon Dogma 3. So relic equipment cannot be upgraded through normal blacksmith enhancement. That separates it from the gear found in the Lost Rites. Lost Rite equipment has fixed properties and becomes stronger when enhanced, while relic weapons rely entirely on the random properties revealed during appraisal. So you essentially have two different loot progression systems. Lost Rite gear is more predictable and follows a traditional upgrade path, and relics are the randomized endgame loot systems where you keep searching for the exact combination that makes your build
Disgusting!
The developers have also said that random drops have been reworked compared with Bitter Black Isle. In the original Dark Arisen, the vocations used by you and your pawn could influence what equipment appeared after a purification. This sometimes meant changing vocations before purifying cursed items just to improve your chances of receiving the gear you actually wanted. So that restriction should no longer apply in the same way. Your current vocation will not prevent you from finding equipment intended for another one. And unwanted relics are not completely useless. You can sell them for gold or convert them directly into rift crystals. Those rift crystals can then be used to pay for more appraisals, creating a self-sustaining sort of like loot economy where even bad drops can contribute towards the next attempt. And finally, Dark Arisen will contain more than 150 new weapons and armor designs. So again, loot progression is one of the main pillars of Dark Arisen. As for hard mode, the wording differs depending on the interview. One describes hard mode as something the team is still considering, while the Japanese interview uses much stronger language and suggests that it is already being actively prepared or developed. So the safest way to describe it, I guess, is this. Hard mode is currently in active planning or development, but we don't know yet whether it will launch alongside Dark Arisen or arrive later through a separate update. What we do know is that it's being designed for experienced players, including those with very high-level characters or characters approaching the level cap. The developers also confirmed that enemies will not scale automatically to match the player's level. Instead, hard mode is supposed to provide stronger resistance through a dedicated difficulty setting. That is probably the better approach. Level scaling would make progression feel meaningless, while a proper hard mode gives veteran players the option to face tougher enemies without forcing that balance onto everyone else. For now though, Hard mode remains one of the biggest unanswered questions surrounding the expansion. We can assume that Capcom's working on it in some capacity, but we don't know whether it will be part of Dark Arisen at launch or one of the major updates planned around it. And now for something Dragon Dogma 2 desperately needed from day one, a proper appearance-changing system. Transmog is confirmed. Players will be able to change the appearance of equipment without changing its stats. That feature becomes available after reaching Norgan, and the developers have said that unlocking it will be tied to gameplay. Beyond that, the exact rules are still unclear. We don't know whether weapons are included, whether every armor piece can be used, whether appearances need to be collected first, or whether the system is connected to a new blacksmith or another NPC in Norgan. So there's still plenty that Capcom has not explained, but it is no longer ambiguous. Transmog exists in some capacity. We just don't know how restrictive it will be, or how many hoops we'll have to go through to get there. And now let's talk about monsters. Norgan will contain enemies created entirely from scratch, including monsters built on completely new skeletons, rather than modified versions of creatures already in the base game. The expansion will also introduce variants of existing monsters, but these are not supposed to be simple recolors with inflated health bars. The developers have said that some of them will come with new moves and behaviors which should make familiar encounters less predictable. Enemy variety was also one of the main reasons Capcom decided not to add new vocations. Instead of dividing development resources between the more playable vocations and more enemies, the team chose to expand the existing vocations and focus more heavily on creating new monsters, new skeletons, and more varied encounters. I mean, whether that trade-off was worth it will depend entirely on how substantial the new enemies are, but Dragon Dogma 2 already has excellent combat tools, and what it desperately needs is more things worth using them against. So what do you think? If you had to choose one, what would it be? New vocations or new enemies? I go monsters all the way for days. Capcom was also deliberately holding back additional monster information for future reveals, so what we have seen so far is only part of the expansion's bestiary. Now let's talk a little bit about pawns. Capcom is continuing to improve their AI through both Dark Arisen and future title updates. Several new pawn behaviors have already been described. Pawns will be able to protect the Arisen when they're exhausted, defend them after they have been frozen, and physically pull or push them away from incoming attacks. They will also become more involved while climbing monsters. We've seen that one. For example, when a pawn extends their hand towards the Arisen and launching them farther up the creature, creating a shortcut during the climb. Interestingly, the developers said that they are not trying to make pawns perfectly efficient. They still want them to retain their personalities, quirks, and occasional moments of the charming stupidity. This is nice, I like that. Capcom has also confirmed that new pawn specializations will be introduced through future updates. Pawn voices, behaviors, and decision-making will continue to be expanded as well, although it is currently unclear which of these changes will arrive with Dark Arisen and which will come through separate title updates or patches. Either way, Capcom clearly understands that pawns are one of the most important parts of Dragon's Dogma, and they continue building on the system. Here are a few quick mentions of the music and sound. The expansion includes entirely new music for Norgan's hub, its open field, combat encounters, and major story beats. The soundtrack will also change as we move deeper into the region. Near the foothills, the music is described as calmer and more restrained, and as the snow becomes deeper and the environment grows harsher, the soundtrack becomes more aggressive. And as we approach the darker parts of Norgan, the music becomes increasingly unsettling. Capcom has also created new sound effects specifically for Norgan's environment. During blizzards, sound will apparently become part of the gameplay itself, visibility will be heavily reduced, but enemy voices and movements and echoes will be mixed in a way that helps us locate threats through the snow. That means we may have to rely on sound rather than sight during certain encounters, which is an interesting way to make the weather affect combat while also making it more immersive. As for post-launch support, the developers want Dark Arisen to be polished and feature complete on release day, but to be clear, they did not promise that there would be no day one patch. What they actually said is that no major post-launch feature additions are currently planned. Bug fixes and emergency updates, some other smaller additions will still happen if necessary, but the intention is for players to receive the complete package, the complete expansion experience at launch. So to round it all up, here are some things that are still unclear to me. You can add your own questions or anything else you'd like answered. I'll then make a massive pinned comment and we can keep an eye out for answers while we wait for Dark Arisen. The biggest one is hard mode, of course. We can assume that it's being worked on in some capacity, but the interviews use noticeably different wordings. One says the team is considering it, while the Japanese interview says it's being actively prepared. So let's just, for the sake of this video, for the sake of the argument, assume that it's there. We still don't know whether hard mode will launch with Dark Arisen, arrive in the August update, or come later as a separate feature. We also have no details about what it actually changes. Increased enemy health and damage, or different encounters, better rewards, reworked economy, new enemy placement. So at the moment, hard mode is just a promising name. We still don't know the size of Norgan or how we actually get there. Is it connected to the base game map? Or are we teleported there like we were with BBI? Also, how many truly new monsters are there? And will they be distributed through the base game as well, or will they be exclusive to Norgan? Capcom says that they have continued working on optimization, but there are no detailed performance targets for Dark Arisen yet. The August title update promises substantial performance improvements, and this update is free for everyone who owns the game, but how substantial those fixes will be remains to be seen. Dark Arisen is still months away, and Capcom clearly intends to reveal more before launch, but until then, this is everything we know about Dark Arisen so far, and just as importantly, everything we don't. Melvo.